welcome back to another episode of Boomer Deepcuts. My name's Grant Hansen, and glad to have you along here again as we continue. We're into our second month now. We're finally caught up live. Like we're into the present, sort of. Because a lot of those first episodes that you watched we recorded back in the summer, and now here we are in the fall and off and running, and glad to be here with you. Thanks so much for all your comments that you've sent in. We can actually start reading those now and going through them live in the moment, so that's great. And we'll have actually one of those for you coming up in the show. If you want to take part in the show with a question for our guests or a suggestion for an album that we cover, just email us at deepcuts@myboomerradio.com. That's deepcuts@myboomerradio.com. Also, a big shout out and a thank you to our sponsor, Kohl's RX. They make everything go for us here on this podcast and a number of different other places here within the Boomer Radio family. So a big shout out to them. We'll talk a little bit about them later on in the show. All right, my pleasure now to welcome back for his second go around today's guest, Neil Nelkin. Welcome back, Neil.
Hey, Grant, good to see you.
This is a fun album today, and that we're about to discuss here, Neil. I think in a lot of ways, this album is what this show was made for. Just so many great hits and such a great story that really went into the creation of Rumors from Fleetwood Mac.
It is not only a musical icon in terms of albums of the 70s, it's a cultural icon. Mm-hmm. It's every bit, for Fleetwood Mac fans, this is every bit as significant as Sgt. Pepper's is for Beatles fans. Mm. There is so much in the backstory of this album, just like there was in Sgt. Pepper's, and the various characters that played a role in the creation of this album. Rumors is a watershed moment in 70s rock. You can kind of define the genre as the music that came before Rumors and the music that came after Rumors. It was that impactful.
Is this the best rock album from the 70s?
In my opinion, yes. There are those that would disagree, of course.
Yes.
But in my opinion, because of not just the album and the songs, but what it meant culturally to the music of the 70s and the progression of the music of the 70s, and also the personalities of the 70s. I mean, you can't get more than Fleetwood Mac into the personalities of the 70s. And there were some big personalities.
Well, and this album in a lot of ways, too, is just like, it's like if you brought sex, drugs, and rock and roll to life and made it into an album that was just called Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. I mean, that's what this is.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll cubed.
And I'm so excited. We're so excited to talk about this. We'll have some cuts for you a little bit later on in the show. There's actually a couple of things I want to talk to Neil about. So it's funny because, normally when we start one of these conversations, I'll say, hey, Neil, where were you in 1977 when this album came out? Well, the thing is, the last time that we did an album with Neil, it was The Stranger from Billy Joel. That was later on in 1977. Mm-hmm. So we already know where Neil was in 1977. But I was struck by something. I went to a couple of different concerts this year, and I went to one very recently at the CHI Health Center in Omaha, and it was Mumford & Sons, so very different, I think, than this era of music, although there are some similarities I think you could point to. But I was sitting there and standing there on the floor level at this concert last Sunday night, and I was thinking, man, what was it like in the 70s from a show running standpoint? Like, not just the music, but the lights and the pyro and some of the things that are kind of associated with modern concerts today, the video screens, the art of everything that goes on besides the actual music itself to keep your attention. And I was wondering, man, what was it simplistic in the 70s? Did you just rely strictly on the music? Was there some of those outside elements? What do you remember?
Not much. The old saying, if you remember the 70s, you weren't there. It was a lot simpler, but that was because the technology didn't exist that you're dealing with now. Everything was analog. You didn't have the digital. You didn't have the effect. You didn't have the opportunities to create the way you do now. And Fleetwood Mac really, it was a studio band more than it was a live performing band, because you never had the personalities on stage that you had in the studio.
Sure.
Totally different people.
Yeah.
And they performed great, and they did wonderful concerts. Don't get me wrong. I saw them 3 times, and They were terrific as a concert act. And the music, of course, was wonderful, very loud, and well processed, well produced. But in terms of the presentation, the sound mix was probably the most important part of a Fleetwood Mac concert. Because with their recordings, and particularly with Rumors, so much of it was done with lots of moving parts over a long period of time that eventually coalesced together.
And so many of the songs on this album were overdubbed, right? Like you're dubbing different parts over each other. I think I was doing when I was doing research on this, I think there's maybe only one part of The Chain, which is a song that we'll play later, obviously. But I think of all the different instruments that are used in that song, I think they only recorded two of them simultaneously.
That's probably true. This album is more of an experience than it is a linear production.
Yeah.
So much of it took place over time when different people were in the studio, and their consciousness, and I hate to use that word, but their consciousness at the time was usually different depending upon what day they were in the studio.
Sure.
If you know what I mean.
The other thing I thought about too while I was at this concert was what you could get in, because we had to wait a relatively decent amount of time in security. But I would imagine in the 70s you could sneak pretty much whatever you wanted into a concert.
Yeah, there wasn't much of a problem back then. But when you got to differentiate really between the Fleetwood Mac live band performance
and
the Fleetwood Mac studio production. Even though the end product sounds similar, they're not at all the same. You got to remember, this was done on tape before digital. This was done on 24-track tape in the studio when you could add and delete via tape. But this was done with cut and paste with razor blades and grease pencils, the way we used to do it.
Wait till wait till we get to Pink Floyd.
Auto-tune.
Like when we do Pink Floyd at some point in the future and Money, I mean, there's just, you listen to some of these and you just think, how did they do it? For somebody who's grown up in an age of computers only, basically, right?
Well, this is where you had producers who were geniuses.
Yeah.
Now, the band itself was made up of geniuses. Don't get me started on that.
Yeah, well, we're about to.
But really, Ken Calais, who produced this in conjunction with other people, started out very young and very inexperienced. By the time this album was done, he was a major figure in record production because of what he did, what he had to do, and what he learned to do in 24-track production in the studio.
Well, and rightfully so. We're going to get to a question, too, at the end. We have one from Jack Urban in Goodyear, Arizona, that I'll ask you at the end of the show, so stick with us. Jack, thank you for submitting a question. By the way, we had a couple of different questions, too, submitted on our Facebook page or just stories. Fremont Eddie had one, and you can wait for not too long, hopefully, Fremont Eddie, because I'm going to save yours for when we have Jack on again.
Stay with us, Eddie.
Yeah. But we appreciate everybody who's offered any sort of thought or story or anything. But Jack, we'll get to your question at the end of the show. So this album, released February 4th, 1977. It was the 11th studio album from Fleetwood Mac. It topped the UK album charts and the Billboard 200 in the US. 40 million copies sold worldwide at last check. I think that's probably closer maybe to 45 now. Anyway, very commercially successful. That's the point there. But all four singles reached the top 10 at the US Billboard Hot 100. It won Album of the Year at the 1978 Grammys. Taken into the Grammy Hall of Fame, just exactly 25 years later in 2003. So pretty much as soon as you could put this thing in the Hall of Fame and the Grammys, it went there. And then it was added to the Library of Congress in 2017. So this thing is enshrined in the history of American culture. And
not just the music. I mean, even the cover art is considered epic and iconic.
Yep.
Very simple.
Yep.
But absolutely perfect.
Right. Very similar to what we had with The Stranger a couple of weeks ago, where, I mean, you're not really thinking too hard or doing anything psychedelic, and that can be fun too, but there's beauty in the simplicity of what we've got up here.
Yes.
So overall album listens today on Spotify. This album has totaled 6.9 billion listeners at the time of this recording. Dreams accounts for 2.3 billion of the listens. The Chain is 1.5 billion, and then Go Your Own Way is third, 1.2 billion. So those 3 songs there account for basically 5.5 of the 6.9 billion listens. And the good thing is Neil picked a couple of songs today that aren't there that are really, really good as well. So we'll get into those just shortly. Neil, I want to lay out sort of our cast of characters because there's a lot of moving pieces. And I thought about this, and I didn't do it, and maybe I should have. I thought about bringing like a whiteboard and have little cutouts with tape of each of the people's faces.
And
okay, all right, they were here. These couples were here at the beginning, and by the end of the recording, they were here, and these people were here, and these people swapped places. But I'll let you do that verbally.
Well, you got to remember that when all this began, Fleetwood Mac originally, when they started out, was a blues band. Mick Fleetwood, John McVie, they were part of the John Mayall Blues Band in England, and they had a background in blues music and blues emulation. The other 2 characters here, Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks, were rock and roll kids. And when they came together, they did not try to inherit the Peter Green Fleetwood Mac or the Bob Welch Fleetwood Mac. They came with their own ideas. They had just come off their Buckingham Nicks album that they did for Polydor. Not a success, critically or commercially, virtually undiscovered. And they joined Fleetwood Mac at a time when Fleetwood Mac was just coming off their White Album success. And they were not totally well known in the United States either. Fleetwood Mac was still probably embryonic. So this all came together at a time when the band wasn't quite coherent with each other. They were all romantically involved when they came together. That ended, and that went
right.
That went to hell.
Well, I mean, they basically came together at the beginning of the end of all of the romantic relationships, and that extended to Mick Fleetwood, and he was sort of the first. So, all right, let me run through the. So, Mick Fleetwood, he's the drummer, original member of the band. Christine McVie, she was keyboards vocalist. We'll hear one of her solos. Actually, the first song we play is from her. Fantastic song. John McVie's on bass, Stevie Nicks vocals, Lindsey Buckingham was the lead guitarist and also a vocalist.
And the bassist.
And then you also can't forget Ken Calais, who was intermixed in all this as well.
He was the producer on this album. I mean, he didn't know the band at all before he went into this production.
And then ended up knowing somebody else relatively. More
than just once. More than just one. But yeah, you got to remember at the time, and remember the 70s, there were this concept that we used to call groupies.
Yeah.
These were young girls. We all referred to them as rock chicks. And they liked to hang around the band. I mean, if you remember the movie with the Band-Aids. Can't remember the name of the movie.
I'm not going to be able to help you.
Almost Famous.
Okay.
That was pretty true to form as to what actually went on with the girls that hung around the rock groups at the time. And there's a couple of famous ones. But the album was recorded at the record plant in Sausalito, just outside of San Francisco. Very much a part of the rock scene of the day. And, excuse me, there were a lot of young girls that used to hang around, late teens, early 20s. And the guys took advantage of it in and around their own individual relationships. Well, Ken had a couple of those relationships. One was the studio manager who was running the Sausalito studio, the record plant. And it took a while, but she and Ken ended up hooking up. Then there were a couple of the bar girls. And, it was just very natural at that time.
Yeah.
At that time, I was in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and we used to go to Coconut Grove all the time as, we were part of the community, and rock artists were there as well. We all hung together, and there were girls everywhere. I'm not going to tell you that it wasn't fun.
Well, so you also had, Mick Fleetwood was really the first person to suffer any sort of romantic pain, I guess, in this situation, because he had
Heineken.
So his wife ends up, the first sort of domino to fall here is he finds out his wife's having an affair with his best friend.
Right.
and he has 2 kids already in the situation. And then you have all these other, I'll let you sort of fill in the rest of the blanks with all the other
Plus,
relationship
Mick is
chaos.
also the leader of the band. He's got all this responsibility on his shoulders, and he took it seriously as a responsibility of both the previous Fleetwood Mac and the new Fleetwood Mac with the new members. Mick took it very seriously, but Mick was also abusive with substance, and that didn't help.
Well, I mean, I think I'm trying to remember, I had a number written down here at one point about how much money went into the production. I think inflation adjusted, I think I saw somewhere around $40 million basically went into the production of this album over the course of a year. And,
Didn't start out that way.
And by the way, here's my question: how much of those millions of dollars went to cocaine? Is the real? It's the real.
I don't think anybody will ever know. That was probably close to Mick's Heineken budget right there.
Well, and so you have all this going on, and this thing took a year. I mean, it took a year to put this together. They recorded over the course of a year in 1976,
and did concerts during this process.
There is no way in hell any record label would allow something like this to get made today. They would have been shut down so quickly.
Well, Warner's had problems initially until they started to hear some of the tracks. The guys that ran Warner Brothers Records in those days, Mo Austin, Lenny Waronker, and some of those guys, they were very much into the music scene. They got it. They understood it. That's why Warner's was so successful. But even they, when they saw the bills starting to mount up on this production for Rumors, they became a bit alarmed, tried to hold it down, but it was not possible to hold down.
Well, speaking of listening to these songs, I was very prepared. Usually we shoot for like a half hour on these. This is going to run long. I'm more than prepared for that and more than okay with that, because you know what, Neil, it's very possible. I've already had discussions with this. We might do another, because we very well could do 2 episodes on this, and I might actually later on come back to this album and do another episode with some different songs, because there's so much here. But let's go to cut 1, which is Songbird, and go ahead and we can play that one. But man, this is Christine McVie, and this is her one solo on side 1, and she wrote, sang, she played the piano part. This song is beautiful.
This is one of those, and you hear McCartney tell stories about this as well. Song came to him in his sleep. Well, this came to her in her sleep, woke up, and fortunately remembered it. And it's maybe her most personal songwriting experience, but it could have been overdone in the production. And I got to give credit to Ken Calais, because he did. He kept it simple and let her come through. And boy, does she.
Well, she woke up at 3:30 a.m. and just started playing. She had an electric keyboard by her bed, and she just laid this whole story. Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, if you're a musical genius, I suppose you have to.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you get stuff like this. And it's funny because she was in a condo with Stevie Nicks, and she said, going back to the groupies, the guys were all over somewhere else partying and doing drugs and being around the girls. And this is what she just woke up. She had this idea that later on they go back to, she points sort of back to this song for holding the band together, because they would hear this song and they would think of all the different things that they'd been through and gone through together, and it would help to ease sort of all the emotional pain and trauma that they were all dealing with.
Well, so many of the songs that were written for this album dealt with easing that emotional pain.
Oh my gosh.
Or resolving an emotional
or expressing
crisis.
it, or just putting it out there.
Yeah, but the beauty of this is that, Christine McVie is not what you would call a great technical singer. But what they did here, they isolated her to the point where she comes through with such feeling and emotion on Songbird that it is just a gorgeous recording, in addition to being a great song.
Yes.
It's a gorgeous recording. You listen to it and you see, or you can hear, what went into it in the studio, in this 24-track process that Ken employed. I don't think, with all the technology we have today, I don't think you could improve on this.
they did this. They recorded it outside the studio. I think this is the one song on the album that actually was recorded outside the studio. And they just took her to an empty auditorium and she played the piano and she sang this song. And it was supposed to be like she's all by herself at the end of the concert. And speaking of, when they would actually go on tour, this was often the last song they played. And then we're going to follow that up here actually later on with one of the first songs they played in a lot of their tours. So, all right, there's Songbird. Love that one. By the way, this is part of what we do here is we take some of these albums like this, and yes, you know the hits, you know Go Your Own Way, but there are other cuts like this one on an album that you don't hear as much on the radio that are fantastic. Another one like
Which
that.
is why you need to get the whole album and experience the album. I mean, we refer to it as album. I like to say LPs because we don't actually physically have albums anymore.
Sure.
And a lot of the younger audience doesn't know what an album is or where that phrase came from. But you need to experience the entire experience of Rumors because it is meant to be a life-changing experience, and it was for every member of the band.
Hey, folks, while we had a break in the action, Grant Hansen here on Boomer Deepcuts, and I wanted to give you a word from our sponsor, Kohl's Pharmacy and Home Care. Now, folks, you have trusted Kohl's with your pharmaceuticals since 1948. They have taken care of you and your family undoubtedly for generations. And did you know they can make your home a safer place to live as well? From chair lifts to ramps, walk-in tubs, and showers, even in-home elevators, they can do a ton for you to make your home a safer place to live with the safety, style, and value that you've come to associate with the Kohl's brand. 402-408-1990, 402-408-1990. That's the number to contact them. You can also visit them on the web. Do your online purchasing there. You can get everything that you would normally get from any of the 3 locations for Kohl's Pharmacy here in Omaha, plus one in Lincoln. You can find all those sorts of things and products online as well. So go online and look up Kohl's Pharmacy and Home Care. They'll get you taken care of. Again, Kohl's Pharmacy and Home Care, safe at home. Next on the track is Gold Dust Woman, and we have a couple of different points for this. We'll start with just kind of the beginning part of this cut 1 of 2 of Gold Dust Woman here. So this is just before the chorus, but probably about cocaine.
Oh, no question.
Oh, man. So later on when she would go on and perform this later on in her career in the early 2000s and 2010, she would dance. And she was doing this sort of just basically Stevie Nicks expressed that she was doing it to basically be like a cocaine addict going around. And she said her back would just really hurt. And everything would hurt after she would perform and dance later on in her musical career.
To be with Stevie Nicks is always a physical experience. She is an amazing performer, but she's an amazing personality. And she never really gets outside of her body. Her body is an extremely important part of her character. And she moves, and she doesn't stand still very, very frequently, especially when she's in a musical environment. And she's got her tambourine and her ribbons and all the stuff that she does. But there are those of us that believe she legitimately is a mystical personality.
And you feel that mysticism in this song, you feel it in really this whole album. Anything she sings, you feel that it feels like she's this like ethereal, this angel or temptress or whatever you want to call her.
For a young guy, you really get it. You really do. You understand her. How she and Lindsay ever stayed together for as long as they did, both personally and musically, because she is such a free spirit.
Yeah.
And he is such a controlling freak.
Right.
How that ever worked for any length of time is amazing because she is, the word I use is mysticism. She's a mystic. She's a extraordinarily creative person.
She's like, I think if you think of women from the 70s and I think she's got to be right next to, if there's a women from the 70s definition in the dictionary, I think her picture has to be like right there.
But she's so much more than a picture. I think of a picture of a woman from the 70s. My iconic would be, remember the movie Forrest Gump? Jenny. Jenny was my idea of a physically represented chick of the 70s. Stevie was just so much more.
Yeah.
Still is.
Yeah. Well, speaking of more, we have more from this song, and this is kind of the other part of this is iconic, is this like howling, wailing thing that she does at the end. I mean, it's like an actual wolf howling out in the night.
Well, Stevie's an animal. She has animal spirit.
I mean, it's just, you talk about mysticism. There's some of that there.
And some people think that's all overblown and public image type stuff, but I don't believe it is. I mean, she really is strange.
So the next song on this, it's a great word, yeah. The next song here is Dreams, and this is the only #1 hit in the U.S. that Fleetwood Mac had, if you can believe that. And the Hot 100, the Billboard numbers necessarily didn't encapsulate how impactful they are and were culturally.
Well, not only culturally for the people that lived through it, for the band. This was the song that is so personal. It is Stevie in her inner mind, which very few of us can really understand. Right. She just cut loose when she wrote this.
And this song is basically Stevie's message to Lindsay, in the way that Go Your Own Way was Lindsay's message back to Stevie. And the way that Stevie perceived all of this was like, look, Dreams for me was super philosophical and introspective. And then Go Your Own Way from Lindsay was just, he's pissed off.
Well, with Lindsay and Dreams, the production of this song would never have been what it is without Lindsay.
Right.
Even though it was so wrenching emotionally for the two of them.
Yes.
And it was essentially Stevie on her own doing this thing, this Dreams. But Lindsay had to be a part of it to be successful, for the song to be successful.
Which is part of why this whole thing is so crazy to me.
Yeah.
Because they were able to compartmentalize in the midst of the drugs and the alcohol. They were able to compartmentalize all their feelings that they had for each other when it came to actually producing the music, and then release them through the music over the course of a year.
Once the music was done, so was everything else. They went their own way. But Dreams, where Lindsay comes together with Stevie to produce the sound of that track.
And the chords, yeah.
The chords. It wouldn't be the same record without him, but it had to be painful for the two of them.
Yes. Here's Dreams. And again, the story here, Stevie wrote this in Sly Stone's bed. He had this big bed that was in a studio right next door.
Sly Stone had his own little segment of the record plant, But don't discount Mick's drums on this track.
Yeah, it drives everything forward. And you can feel the mystical tone here and the loneliness. And then here comes the chorus, and I mean, it's just iconic. But you're right, like the drums, that's a great point there. That gets us into it, right? That drives us into it.
It tracks the whole song. And that was a genius of Mick Fleetwood. He knew when to be foreground. He knew when to be background. He knew when to do the right fills at the right place.
Yep. Women, they will come and they will go. Players only love you when you're playing. I mean, that's directly, right?
Yeah.
But she still, she recalls, in interviews later, she handed the rough cut of the tape to Lindsay, and he just smiled at her, and like it wasn't rage and frustration, it was respect of
Stevie,
of what she was and what she did and her talent. And
that's what makes Stevie Nicks so unique. There is no one else like her.
Oh, 100%.
And there's a lot of right place, right time about what took place here.
Oh, yeah.
Had it been in someplace different, or a different studio, or maybe
with different bosses.
Yeah, it would have not coalesced the way it did.
Perfect storm. It really is. And lastly here is my favorite song from this album, The Chain. But you see John McVie come in right now with his contribution and this iconic bass line. I mean, of all the bass line, this has to be one of the most famous bass lines ever. And it just takes you there and drives you into this like cacophony of all this perfectly orchestrated sound.
It impregnates your brain.
That's a good way of putting it, too.
McVie's bass lines are always intimate. It gets inside your head.
Yes. And then, like, I mean, this is just incredible.
And then you put mixed drums on that.
Yep.
Come on.
All the different layers. And then when they come in with the vocals at the end, and you know the history of all this stuff, right? And the history of their relationship. And it's like when you add all those things in there, you understand.
I know a lot of people try to compare, say, who is the better drummer, Ringo or Mick? And it's like comparing apples and oranges. You can't. Because what they contributed to their individual music is so different.
So
but
special.
Mick was so perfect at this time for this band.
So they worked backwards from the bass part on this one, Neil, because it was usually John McVie actually wrote it originally for a different song. And this song was originally called Butter Cookie, Keep Me There. And then they worked backwards. So they added the drum in with the metronome. They worked backwards from the bass part into everything else that this song became. And it was often the first song that they began the concerts with. So we began we went backwards. We started our cuts with usually the last song they played on tour, and then we ended with the first song that they played. And man, talk about a tone setter. I mean, oh man, and there's so many bands. This is one of them, Dire Straits. I'm trying to think of, well, obviously the Beatles. There's so many different bands that, born too late to see in concert, but I wish, man, I really wish.
I wish you could have, because you have such a good understanding and a feeling for the music. It would have been transformational for you.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. So there are all of our cuts, if you can believe it. And we are going to run through, we usually go through the end of our show with just some things that are happening at the time. February 1977. Let's see. So the Wings released Maybe I'm Amazed. That was the same day that comes out on February 4th, I believe. Sugar Ray Leonard makes his boxing debut a day later on February 5th. On February 11th of that month, a 20.2 kilogram lobster was caught off the Nova Scotia coast, which is still, to my knowledge, the heaviest known crustacean ever caught. It was 45 pounds.
I vaguely remember that story.
45 pounds.
Yeah.
That is massive.
It's a good lobster roll.
February 13th, the NBA All-Star Game was that day. West beat the East 125-124, back when the game was a competitive actual thing you'd like to watch. And Julius Erving, Dr. J, was the MVP.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
February 18th.
Trivia, Julius Erving.
Yeah?
Where did he make his NBA debut?
I'm going to guess Omaha.
No.
No, okay. No. Kansas City? I don't know.
No, that's all right.
Okay.
Move on. We'll cut that part out.
Or maybe not. Kiss, February 18th. Kiss plays its first concert in their hometown venue at Madison Square Garden. That was February 18th of that year. Also on that same day, George Harrison releases his single True Love. On the 19th of February, Blinded by the Light, which is the cover of the Bruce Springsteen song from Manfred Mann's Earth Band, that goes to number 1 on the 19th of February. On the 25th, more basketball stuff, as Pistol Pete Maravich set the NBA record at the time for points by a guard. He had 68 in one game. That record has been obliterated since, but Pistol Pete was amazing. On the 27th, Keith Richards got suspended for a suspended sentence for a heroin possession charge in Canada. And then also on that same day, ABBA arrives in Australia for the first time, which then sparked ABBA Mania in Australia. So there's a little rundown of some of the things that happened in February of 1977, along with the release of Rumors.
Memorable month.
All right, lastly here, I'm going to read you a submission we had from a listener. And again, if this stuff is fantastic, so keep more of this coming. This comes from Jack Urban, who is a former Omaha resident and a viewer of the show in Goodyear, Arizona. And he says he watches a lot of YouTube videos, and of course he listens to Boomer. Thank you. But the younger generation, he counts us as born in the 90s or later, so millennials, Gen Z, discovering songs from the 60s and 70s, and he watches a lot of these videos on YouTube, sort of similar to the show that we do here, but they record their first reaction ever to hearing some of the music, and it blows him away is what Jack says, because he says, I grew up with music in the 1960s and 70s. I was born in 1958. I was always around music, listening on the radio. His parents met at chorus at Omaha South. His mom played the piano and the organ. He was in the chorus at Ryan High School. So he was around music his whole life. And he sees stuff about the Righteous Brothers and ELO and Moody Blues, and people hearing some of these bands for the first time, none of which we've done on this show yet. I'm sure we will. But he says, when I watched their reactions, I felt that these youths have led such a sheltered life. He says youths in quotes. Then I have to realize that I didn't know much about music from the big band era until I started watching old movies or cable TV. And that wasn't until the mid to late 70s that he started noticing all that stuff. So he says, it would be interesting to hear from you, Neil, or any of the Boomer On Air personalities when they first heard this same music that the millennials are just experiencing, to see if their reaction was the same. When you first heard stuff like this, or the Beatles and some of those other songs, was your reaction as floored as maybe some of the young folks are today when they hear some of this music for the first time?
Well, you have to put it in context. The music back then was a part of a lifestyle. It wasn't just music. And I won't say it was a rock and roll lifestyle, because rock and roll really, it was a name, but it really hadn't evolved into a concept the way it eventually did. But I can remember hearing Bobby Rydell on the radio for the first time, or hearing any of those types of artists, Dion DiMucci, Dion and the Belmonts. They were huge, never made a lot of money. They didn't actually sell a lot of records, because you got to remember, at those days, the 45s we used to buy were 49 cents in the stores. LPs were maybe $3.98, but we didn't have any money either, so we didn't go buy a lot of records. But radio was it. It hadn't evolved into what was called Top 40 yet, but it was essentially Top 40 radio. And the big stations, the WLS in Chicago, the KHJ in Los Angeles, WABC in New York, WKBW Buffalo, the station, the McClendon stations in Dallas, and Coil here in Omaha, which was a legendary, seminal part of that whole thing. When you listen to these radio stations and the integrated personalities that were on the air on these stations, that became the lifestyle you wanted to be a part of. The announcers, and they were announcers, although we called them disc jockeys. It's not like they are today, where they read 5-second liner cards between records. And
sure,
they actually told stories and related their relationships with the artists.
Stuff we do here on Boomer.
Well, it became part of the context. The personalities became as important as the music. I don't want to overblow it, but when you played something from Dion and the Belmonts, you kind of knew who the guys were and what they were all about, and you related those stories. And it wasn't scandal at the time, because everybody kept that off the boards. But it was just really nice personalities. The girls liked guys who could dance, and the guys liked the girls. And it was just that basic. It was very simple. Our life then was cars and girls. That was it. And the music played such an important role.
Yes.
Now, a lot of that changed during the 60s with the war, and the music became political. We all became political, and those of us on the radio kind of had to do it as well to follow the trend and to remain popular.
Yeah.
And we became very effusive. Then FM came on board, FM, which was then called underground radio, because FM stations played the stuff that the AM stations didn't or wouldn't play, and it developed a whole cultural subtext. And so you really can't compare these people that are discovering the music for the first time today to those of us who discovered Bobby Rydell's Wildwood Days back in 61 or 62. I mean, the number one record of the year was The Twist. I mean, how much more inane can you be? It's not like that was John Fogerty singing about Fortunate Son.
Oh, man. Well, this is awesome. Thank you so much, Jack, for the question. Please, folks, keep it coming. Seriously, like, this is the exact type of stuff that this show was built for, was these thoughts like this from Jack and these questions like this and music like this. It's so fascinating to me that there could be so much emotional value, life experience, all these sorts of things that are tied literally just to this single object.
Well, we decided that we were going to do this album, LP. There's two different things here. There's this wonderful piece of plastic, an analog piece of plastic that you put on a rotating thing and stick a needle on it. Think of how simple that actually is.
Yes.
It's a piece of plastic, but it has become such an important part of the culture of the 70s and 80s and how influential it was in all of our lives when we were there. Now, today, I don't think you can appreciate the impact culturally it had, but it was a different time.
Yeah.
A different period.
And you feel it. You feel all the emotional strife and just everything that all 5 members of this band poured into this, their heart and soul. And that's part of what makes this album so great and legendary.
I don't mean to denigrate the music that came along later, because in its time, with its audience, I mean, I don't have a particular affinity for Kurt Cobain, but I understand a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And I get it. I happen to think Taylor Swift may be the ultimate extension of where we've been and where we're coming, because she is so impactful. And her music, frankly, is pretty good. But it's all an evolution.
Yes.
And those of us who were there at the beginning of the evolution,
seen all of it.
Or you mentioned the big band. I remember my dad listening to the radio, and he was a fan of, Sinatra and the big bands. And I didn't appreciate that music until many, many years later. But I do now.
Right. Such a great episode. I knew it was going to be. And then we sat here and we did it, and I was like, well, this is pretty good. Hopefully you think so too. But thanks again so much for being here, Neil. Big thank you again to Kohl's RX, our sponsor. I don't know what we'll do next time, but I can guarantee you we'll have a lot of fun talking about whatever album we do next when we get back together with you again, Neil, in December.
There are so many out there.
So much gold. Again, thanks so much for joining us here on Boomer Deepcuts for Neil Nelkin. I'm Grant Hansen saying so long and keep on booming.